Dr. Templeton, could you share something that stands out in your literacy journey?
First of all, I don't think that's a marvelous question. And I didn't start out as a teacher wanting to or thinking that I would be teaching literacy. I always wanted to teach. I majored in history. I did minor in English, but I wanted to teach high school, history in high school. And my first interview many, many years ago was in a small rural district in Virginia. And the superintendent was conducting the interview. And after telling me, straight out, Shane, no history positions, they called it junior high back then, junior high, high school, there's nothing. I see you minored in English, nothing there. And then he paused for what seemed like a very long time. And then he leaned forward and he asked me, have you ever thought about teaching first grade? I had not, but I wanted a position, I wanted a job. And I don't remember what I said in that moment, but probably something came out like, how did you know? This is my ultimate fantasy to teach first grade. But it really changed the direction of my teacher life, if you will. Starting out wanting to teach history, and I've kept on being a history buff all these years, but working with first graders, and they did not have kindergarten. I mean, the first day they came through that door and we were all learning together. But it really changed my professional life. I fell in love with them. I became fascinated with how little ones learn to read and write. And in later years, older ones and on through adults. But that's where it started. If it hadn't been for those first graders, I might have taken a very different route and not wound up in literacy education as I've had for these many decades.
Would you maybe tell us something that you're currently working on or something that's on your mind?
Thank you for the question. My colleagues and I are finishing up writing the 6th edition of Words Their Way, which is always a thrill to be working on that. And we've enjoyed it all these years and written many other related books, building on our research and working with teachers and teaching ourselves. As that comes to be wrapped up, I'm taking a little bit more time each day and working on a very different book than any of the others that I've written or co-authored over the years. I've talked with parents and lay professionals my entire life about how their children are learning to read, and I've enjoyed that, and we all do that as teachers. So much of what we do is educating parents as much as children. But as I've shared with teachers and now wish to share with a larger lay professional audience, the way that we spell words in English is not wildly illogical, crazy, incomprehensible. It really does make sense. Now, we haven't been brought up believing that or being taught that way. But as we've done in Words Their Way and in much of our work, there is logic to the system. It's not easy to learn. Of course, it isn't. It takes many years, but there's logic. And I've worked for many years with teachers and developing the understanding of there's logic in how we spell sounds. It's not perfect, but there's more logic than not. And there's logic in how we spell meaning. And the book that I've begun to work on now is aimed at a wider, as I say, lay professional audience, talking about not only the way that words are written in English, and it does make sense, and helping folks understand that, but then what does that mean? If we really, more of us understood that, what are the implications for education? For not just learning how to spell, I mean that's important of course, but we have spell checkers. But learning how the system works goes beyond just spelling words. It supports learning how to read words, it supports learning vocabulary. With older students, as I've talked here at the conference today, it really gets them into thinking about the development and evolution of language, the development and evolution of thought, all by beginning with looking at how words are written and then using that as the jumping off point for exploration. So I'm obviously on a mission with that, and I'm working on it and hope that a couple of years from now we have this conversation again, that project will have been realized. So I appreciate the opportunity to chat a bit about it. Thank you.
What is that one burning topic that keeps you awake at night? Something that maybe we need to reconsider or should be looking at in the field of literacy?
The what keeps me awake at night, or at least I'll get to sleep, but I'll wake up with a start, perhaps we'll say, and then I start thinking about this. Now that we are being guided by and learning about and implementing the English language arts Common Core standards, as we all know, there's a debate, there's controversy, but most of the intent, I think, and the objectives, the goals in those standards are what good educators have been embracing for years. And we tend to squabble about the finer points here and there. One point that I'm concerned about, and it really isn't I wouldn't say this is the fault of, excuse me, or the problem with the Common Core, quite the opposite. I was quite pleased when I first opened the standards a few years ago and saw that in the area of foundation skills, what has to do with what children and older students are learning about words, decoding them, fluency, and so on. I was very pleased to see what was in there, and I also was pleased to see that they were arranged developmentally. The folks who crafted the Common Core were familiar with the research. And when we think about how children become aware of phonemes, how they begin to learn letter sounds and read and so on, the standards, while not telling us how to teach that, they have laid out that scope and sequence. Very pleased to see that. All of that said, the foundational skills are not being assessed in the context of the Common Core. And I have talked with folks all across the country, not just since I've been here in Kentucky, but that we're seeing the implications of that. If it is not tested, or the expectation is that it will not be tested or assessed, it will probably not receive the degree of attention that it ought to. So my concern when I wake up and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, how are we going to be addressing this, is that those foundational skills do indeed need to be taught. And when I talk about this, I try to make the case that they are what enable students to access more complex texts, to be able to do close readings, to reflect critically, all of those things that are in the core and that we believe in. But if I don't understand as a learner how words work, and I haven't explored the structure of words enough that it allows me automatically to decode most words that I'm going to encounter, I'm not going to be able independently to deal with those very important texts to the degree, to the extent, to the level that the Common Core wishes me to. And it's not just the Common Core. We all want students to be able to interact with text, to reflect critically, to use them as models for their own writing and their own critical thinking. But there's a reason why those foundational skills are called foundational. If they are not in place adequately, then all the rest will crumble and fall. So that's what keeps me awake at night, frankly.